Fit to Love, Episode 15, 5 Essential Lifestyle Tips to Heal Your Hormones.
Fit to Love is physical, emotional, and spiritual fitness to achieve the happy life you deserve. From exercise to cooking, relationships, and spirituality, you'll find all the inspiration you need right here with our host, JJ Flizanes.
Hello and welcome to the Fit to Love Wellness Wednesdays. Today's show, the 5 essential food and lifestyle tips to heal your hormones. Today's guest is a very, very dear friend to me. She's basically family. Jeanne Peters is a registered dietitian and a healthy aging expert with a mission to help women and men feel more vital energy through the healing power of whole foods and lifestyle medicine. In practice for over 33 years, she specializes in optimizing women's hormone health, digestive, thyroid disorders, and how to break through weight loss resistance. She co-founded the Nourishing Wellness Medical Center with partner Dr. Jeanne Peters, who specializes in bioidentical hormone health and homeopathy for men and women. She was voted California Dietitian of the Year by her colleagues for her nutritional expertise and was recently certified in Clinical Homeopathy. Welcome, Jeanne.
JJ, thank you. It's great to be here.
So today's show, we are going to talk about hormones. And the first thing I want everyone to hear and understand, because, it's kind of controversial, this topic of hormones, is that we're going to be talking about how to heal your hormones with natural methods. Today's topic is not about bioidentical hormones, correct?
Correct. Yep. We're going to look at how you can reset your hormones with just your lifestyle or what you put into your mouth. Reset it with your fork. Food first.
Excellent. I love that. So first, what do we mean when we say heal your hormones? Like, why is that important?
Yeah, good question, JJ. Hormone health is what regulates so many of our processes. We've got endocrine hormones that regulate our blood sugars, that regulate our growth patterns, like your human growth hormone is really essential for helping you to, be able to maximize your muscle mass and to grow. But then you've also got hormones like insulin, which is responsible for helping to absorb the sugar that you generate from your foods. And then you've got your sex hormones, which, my goodness, they're not only just, available to help with your libido and for our being able to copulate, but also to be able to keep strong bones, a strong brain. There's receptor sites for testosterone and progesterone and even estrogen in our brains. So there's a huge connection between our hormone health and keeping it at optimal levels and our overall systemic health. So it's a good topic. It's a good topic to address because so many people are concerned these days as to whether or not their stress hormones are out of balance. And, if one thing's out of balance over time, many of the different hormone patterns can get out of balance, which we'll talk about today.
I'd like you to address and explain to everyone who's listening, because it happened to me a couple weeks ago when I was speaking, and it happens all the time, actually, when I'm speaking to groups in the corporate world. I'll ask the group who's heard of adrenal fatigue. And 9 times out of 10, most of the people in the room have not heard of adrenal fatigue. And I'm always shocked by that. So can you please educate everyone as to what adrenal fatigue is?
Great question. Yeah, it's really becoming more epidemic. And it's true that many people don't hear about it because, unfortunately, traditional medicine still doesn't necessarily acknowledge it. But the field that we work in is called functional medicine and functional nutrition. So we're looking at like the function of the body. And the adrenal glands are 2 little almond-shaped glands that sit on top of the kidneys. And they regulate your stress hormones, which includes your cortisol and your DHEA. And they regulate some other hormones as well, like, even just things related to your salt balance. But let's just talk for a moment just about the more common ones, which is cortisol. So again, that's a stress hormone that circulates during the day, and its primary function is to help support the energy demands on the body, and it liberates sugar and fuel into your bloodstream. But if you're somebody who's pushing your body beyond its limits, you may be over time putting out plenty of cortisol during the day, but maybe you're not replenishing at night during sleep, when sleep is most essential for our hormone health. So over time, people could potentially, if they were burning the candle at both ends, trying to get the most out of the day, which is kind of in our culture what we tend to promote, even as early as with teens, double practices or something. You may be finding that your adrenal glands aren't responding as well. So over time, you may not be producing enough of these critical hormones to be able to sustain a really good balanced energy, JJ. And that's really what is usually the most significant sign when people come into our office, is that they have energy imbalances. And so we'll look and measure these critical stress hormones. And oftentimes what we find out is, they're low. Their bank account is depleted. And so thankfully, we can rebuild it, but it's not like if we were just managing it better, which is really what I want to talk about today, is like, how could we help to sustain these critical hormones so they don't get to the point where you've got like a zero bank account?
I had heard you speak many times. Obviously, we've worked together for many years, and I've heard you often say, in terms of adrenal fatigue and adrenal hormones, that DHEA, so your adrenal hormones are made up of cortisol and DHEA, and the DHEA is like the mother hormone.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, and if I'm right, you can continue to explain that once you are depleted with DHEA, it affects, like you just said, the balance of everything else. So someone might have low thyroid or low testosterone or low estrogen, but if they work on that adrenal health first, the DHEA and the cortisol, that will help then to replenish as best you can, naturally, the rest of your hormones, correct?
Oh, very much so. Think of it as like I almost want to look at like a three-sided triangle, and each of that parts of the triangle are equal in length and distance, and that would be ideal. So on one hand, you've got your sex hormones. On one hand, you have your thyroid. And let's say at the bottom or the base is your stress hormones. And let's just imagine that you're just like any woman or man in life, you're in your 30s or 40s and you're just pushing, you're making a lot of career decisions. Maybe you're not getting adequate amount of sleep. You're working out like a maniac in the morning, and, maybe you're not eating as ideal as you could. What might be occurring is that your body, in order to be able to manage and maintain your stress hormones like your DHEA, it might steal from your progesterone. It might actually steal from your sex hormones, which then can convert those sex hormones into your stress hormones. So your body's almost like Legos. It can go ahead and break those Legos apart and make something new with it. The pieces are components, and believe it or not, the components are made up out of cholesterol and some other kinds of fats. So your body has learned to adapt, but one of the ways that might impact, let's say, a woman who's maybe stressed out, is that her progesterone levels will begin to fall. And if that's the case, classically, she's going to have some PMS issues right around the time of her ovulation, and for sure around the time of her period. And so we see that, we see the connection between first the stress hormones get out of balance and the body starts stealing from these sex hormones, and then ultimately it can throw off your thyroid. So that's usually the last to go. Your body really wants to go ahead and manage that one because that regulates your temperature and your metabolism and your heart rate, and it's got so many important functions. But, they're all connected, and they're all like a symphony. We're trying to keep everything in balance.
And I think that's a great point about, I love the stealing idea, right,
Yeah.
of borrowing to replenish what you're not making because you're using too much of it. And I know Alison Armstrong talks about the different biological way our brain works between men and women, and I know that obviously men have more testosterone than women. Men are more single-focused than women, and when women in the workplace and with careers try to focus more and be more masculine and use that energy, we get depleted even faster. And so I think women tend to go into adrenal fatigue, would you agree, faster than men?
I think it's classic. I think you're absolutely spot on with what you suggested. I think that it's true in both, but I think because women tend to be givers and they tend to want to help, it's their nature. And there's a lot of women that are walking around really fatigued. They're shortchanging themselves on sleep. They may be, because they're body conscious, pushing themselves with their workouts. And, and they may be, trying to juggle a job and also raising children, So, yeah, that's the classic example. And believe me, I see these women all the time. They've got great intentions, and they don't realize that they're really, really depleting themselves. And it takes a while to go and rebuild things back up. So, if any of you women and or men are out there and, you've got chronic fatigue, I think it's really important to think that it could very much be related to your stress hormones. And so a good place to start would be to get your cortisol and your DHEA tested to see where your levels are at.
I think it's probably, would you say, an indication of if you don't kind of catch it now, it's going to go downhill later with how it's going to disrupt everything else.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that catching it sooner makes it a lot easier to go and replenish. It's like a bank account. You know, if you wait until your bank account is completely depleted, you can't really withdraw anything and put it into your wallet, you know. So think of your wallet as like your blood levels, and then your bank account is really looking at, you know, your overall stores. And so your adrenal glands can store a certain amount of these hormones, but it can't be in there forever if you're not restoring it. And one of the best ways to restore it is through sleep, which we'll talk about in a bit.
That's great. And actually, I know we're going to get into this great 5-step tip acronym. And before we do that, though, let's just dispel some of the myths that you think exist about hormone health and things about hormones that maybe scare people.
Yeah, I think a big one is that a lot of women can't imagine that, particularly women who may be in their 20s or 30s are still having regular periods. It's hard for a lot of those women to imagine that something could be out of balance with their, let's say, their sex hormones. A classic example would be of women who do maybe have disrupted hormones, sex hormones I'm talking about, as well as stress hormones. Could be somebody who gets almost like a periodic migraine, like every month they have migraines. And when we start to go ahead and look at that pattern, we can often see that those migraines come oftentimes maybe a couple days before they ovulate or a couple days right before their period. Well, those are very much related to hormones and hormones that are out of balance. Like a classic example could be a woman with really elevated estrogen levels and a low progesterone. Or another one would be men who are maybe only in their 40s or 50s and they're thinking, how in the world could I be low in testosterone? Well, your hormones peak, guys, at about 18 to 22, because that's the age that our physiology developed for us to be able to sort of peak, you know, our sperm production and just our ability to be successful with copulation. But after about that age, we start declining. And believe it or not, with all of the sort of toxins and sort of the stresses of everyday living, we're finding that both men and women are seeing much lower levels than we did, let's say, 10 years ago. We didn't really measure much of this prior to that, JJ, so a lot of the data that's coming in is really coming in the last 10, 15 years when more and more men and women are experiencing fatigue and they're wondering why. So I think that's one of the greatest myths is that you don't have to wait until you're like in your 50s or 60s. You may be, if you're experiencing fatigue, you ought to go and have both your sex and your stress hormones tested.
I have.
Yeah.
I've already been on that, but I did it because I thought when I was 30, I got my first test. You'll laugh at this. I think you already know this. When I turned 30, I went to my current gynecologist and I said, I'd like you to test all my hormones. So that way in the future, when I want to replenish, I know what my levels were and what the ratios were. I said, please test all my hormones. And what did they test? My estrogen and progesterone. And I didn't know back then what I know now, but I thought, are you kidding me? 2? That's it? I just think it's so funny. I'm so glad to have learned so much from you and Dr. Allen because then the next time I went in, I was very specific, and I still to this day work with my gynecologist and tell them exactly what I want, and they do it because, like you said, Western medicine is not necessarily recognizing the effect, the long-term effect, and the systemic effect of other things that happen, you know, based on the fact that you're completely out of balance with your hormones. They almost expect you to age, and they expect you to have things happen to you as you age. And I know you guys practice from a place of saying you don't have to age. You can age optimally. You don't have to fall apart as you get older. You can maintain this optimal level of health and die healthy versus, you know, be decrepit and falling apart.
I love that idea. I'm so glad you brought that in. I mean, we want to go and, you know, live to the point where, you know, we feel really like our life is and our desire to live is a choice in which it's easy to do. We've got a lot of ease. You know, I'm hoping for, like, I go to bed and I don't wake up. That's my idea, you know, that I'm not suffering, in other words, and I'm not dealing with some kind of chronic degenerative disease. So absolutely, JJ, your hormone health is very much connected to how well you age. And so, yeah, let's give people some tips on how they can optimize their ability to age well.
Before we do that, let's just take a moment to thank our sponsors.
Is your website working for you? If it's not, and you're frustrated with your brand, website, or current online results, Every Angle Media can help transform your existing business presence and build you a website that works when you're not working. Every Angle Media is a full-service web development firm that specializes in solving problems with open-source solutions. We offer complete design services, custom content management systems, fully integrated e-commerce solutions, cross-platform mobile development, and custom third-party integration, and we're here to help. Visit our site to see our work at everyanglemedia.com or give us a call at 310-798-7228. Again, that's everyanglemedia.com. Want even more up-to-date recipes, product reviews, exercises, and mental stimulation? You can find step-by-step articles from top-notch experts on invisiblefitness.com/blog. If you're busy like me, you may want the convenience of having these articles mailed directly to your inbox every month. So be sure to register your name and email at the top of the page so we can make sure you don't miss anything. Again, that's invisiblefitness.com/blog, INVISIBLEFITNE.
Okay, Jeannie, so we have our 5-point tips. Go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thanks, JJ. I'm going to give people an acronym to help your hormone health, and the acronym is SHINE, SHINE, and each one of those letters represents a different aspect. So let's start off with S for sleep. And it turns out that, if you want to win the hormone health game, one of the key things is to take a look at how well do you get to sleep? Does it take you longer than 10 or 15 minutes to get to sleep? Are you the type that has to take some kind of medication in order to get to sleep? It turns out that our bodies have periods of time where we're highly active and then highly inactive. And our adrenal glands and our sex hormones really love recovery between 11 and 1 o'clock in the morning. So the sleep that you get before 11 is so valuable. So that's really the first place I like to start, is to get people to really improve their sleep. Not getting enough sleep does a number of things. One is that it lowers your insulin sensitivity, which means that your cues for your sugar aren't quite as accurate. You're not pulling the sugar out of your bloodstream as effectively. So there's a connection between inadequate sleep and actual weight gain, belly fat. It also helps to raise your cortisol levels. And cortisol is that fight or flight hormone. So we don't want it too high and we don't want it too low. It's like Goldilocks. We want it right in the middle. Good night's sleep is one way to help restore those cortisol levels naturally. So sleep. And then the next one is, JJ had already mentioned that your mother hormones, which start off with like pregnenolone and DHEA, are made from cholesterol. And think about what's going on in our culture right now. We've got like a cholesterol war that's happening, in which the medical community is really encouraging people to get their cholesterol levels down as low as possible. Unfortunately, this is all being driven by big pharmaceutical companies that are manufacturing cholesterol-lowering medications. And I'm here to tell you that my husband and I practice functional medicine, and it's really important to us that we don't get people's cholesterol levels so low, because you don't have the substrates to make your hormones. A good analogy would be if you ever played with Legos. Legos are like building blocks, and those individual little blocks are like parts of cholesterol. You need to have a lot of them to be able to put together the various kinds of hormones that your body needs to sustain good health. So you want to be eating plenty of healthy fats, which include things like avocado and your butter, believe it or not, and eggs are a great source of cholesterol. You want it with the yolks. You don't want to do those egg white omelets anymore if you're trying to help build your hormones back up. And you definitely want, if you are somebody who's eating animal protein, you want to look at the palm of your hand and at least get a portion a day that's about the size of your palm and about the thickness of your palm from, good, lean, quality protein, which will also include some cholesterol. And if you're somebody who's more vegetarian or vegan, there's ways that you can get your cholesterol primarily from, like your eggs. You can't get it from anything you really do need animal products, unfortunately, to get cholesterol. So keep that in mind. But your healthy fats can certainly help as well.
I want to pause for a second because and I want you to dispel two myths. First of all, I have been testing my hormones every year and having you look at it, and you know from this last year that I naturally increased my testosterone. And I'm not taking any bioidentical hormones right now, and it's just in lifestyle change that included more sleep, and the next one we're going to talk about. And my cholesterol went down 30 points in the last 2 years. And I have to tell you all, I have butter and or coconut oil and or coconut cream, like full fat coconut cream, every day in multitude. I have it in my coffee. I have it in, I cook with it. I bake with it. I've got so much, and I've lost weight, so it's not like I'm gaining weight and eating all this fat. I'm maintaining or losing weight, but my cholesterol is going down. So I know, Jeannie, that a lot of people get nervous about cholesterol because they think that the heart disease comes from the cholesterol, and it really doesn't. It comes from inflammation and things like you talked about, like sugars. And so can you explain a little bit more about that correlation between I'm not going to eat egg yolks because I'm concerned about cholesterol and heart disease, and how that's really not connected?
Yeah, it's so unfortunate that, years ago, back in, probably in the late 70s or 80s, Ansel Keys was a researcher who did some looking at the connection between our cholesterol levels and saturated fats in the blood. And unfortunately, the research wasn't that great, but at the time, it was as good as we had. And so it takes sometimes 10 to 12 years to get a new idea embedded into people's way of thinking. And then it's really hard to get it out. So back then, some of this research indicated that, sure enough, eggs were like 250 milligrams of cholesterol. So at the time, the food industry was really down on eggs, and that's why egg whites, came into being. But it really wasn't the egg. Unfortunately, it was the toast and the jam. It was the sugar. It was the foods that actually elevated blood sugar levels that have the most to do with raising cholesterol unnaturally. But, at the time, people couldn't tease that out. They couldn't see the connection between carbohydrates and grains and the impact that it has on cholesterol levels. Now we see it. Well, it's going to take probably another, 8 to 10 years before those ideas get fully embedded into public health recommendations. But we're getting there, but it's slow to undo that kind of rethinking. But I'm so glad you're having this show just for that reason. So I'm hoping that those of you that are listening right now could feel a little bit more comfortable in knowing that your egg is really a fabulous food for you. And the yolk in particular is fabulous not only for your hormones but for your brain. Really helps. There's a lot of components in yolks that are wonderful for feeding the brain well.
Excellent. Well, we're going to have you back multiple times, and we'll talk more about foods because Jeannie is a wealth of knowledge. So stay tuned, and definitely feel free to write in and let us know if there's something you'd like to hear about specifically. You can send an email to info@invisiblefitness.com. So let's move on to part 3.
Yeah, this is a big one, for all of us, including myself, JJ, and I know for you, and that's called investigate, but investigate your stressors. What are the things in your life that tend to go ahead and get you feeling out of balance? What are the things that occur that maybe cause your heart to race or cause you to feel like you don't have control? Those are things that oftentimes when we're really we find ourselves getting angry or frustrated, we're creating patterns within the body that are affecting our hormones. And it starts with our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous system. I'm one that when I get stressed out, it's usually things in which I'm having anxiety. And the first way that I'll see it show up is that, I have to run to the bathroom. It has an impact on both my kidneys and on my elimination. So I know that I'm somebody that has to learn how to use deep breathing, to help me when I'm in situations where I feel like I don't have quite control. So looking at your stressors, because this has a definite impact. Maybe you might want to add to that, JJ.
Well, we've done a few shows already. I think one, episode number 11, I believe, is a connection between emotion and disease. But it's really more than emotion and disease. It's more like emotion and experience, and that's with Lynn Boutrous. And we talk about things like, so I invite everyone to go back and listen to that show, because she talks about basic, simple things like back pain and anxiety and how those kind of get triggered in you. And absolutely healing the inside and how you think and feel, because your feelings guide you to making choices during the day. And if you're feeling anxiety and you're reaching for the wrong food that's going to spike your insulin level and have you crash later, then you're on this vicious cycle. So this show, obviously, if you've been listening for a little while, is a holistic kind of every piece of the puzzle that kind of goes together to create your experience. So stress, don't negate stress, because it probably is the biggest factor in your whole life driving all of your results. So, yes, we could talk about stress for a long time, but we need to move on because the next one's definitely very exciting. Go ahead, Jeanne.
So I'm going to just put N for nutrition, and it's really looking at the fact that there's a whole new area in the field of medicine called nutrition endocrinology, and it's really looking at the impact of what we eat and how food first can really help us to reset our hormones. So I'm only going to focus on one thing. I could be looking at your protein. I'm going to look at carbs. And one of the things I'm going to suggest is that if you're struggling with your weight, if you sense that maybe you've got sugar cravings and you already know maybe that you've got hormonal havoc, you definitely know that your cortisol levels are possibly higher, or you've got lower sex hormones, focus on getting more of your carbohydrates coming from low-starch vegetables and less grains. We're seeing that grains actually can really drive up cortisol, that it can actually drive up insulin. And insulin and cortisol both have a lot to do with storing fat, storing your body fat. Whereas if you restrain the grains and really look at maybe how you could get more vegetables in, replacing your portion of, let's say, pasta or rice or potatoes or bread, and instead adding in a serving of vegetables, you can do a huge reset, actually not only resetting your metabolic hormones, but also your stress and sex hormones. So that would be my 1 point for nutrition. And, the last one is E, and E is for exercise.
Yay!
I know you would love this one, right? So, it turns out that exercise is something in which we can actually stimulate our production of human growth hormone every day just simply by triggering the release of that growth hormone through strenuous physical activity. Besides sleep, I love to go ahead and have people every day looking at what they can do to get some kind of activity in. And it turns out that, you don't need to be working out like a maniac, that actually some of us that, think that more is better could actually be really impacting our ability to produce our human growth hormone. So it's really rest-based activity, one in which, you're working hard as you can, but at the same time making sure that you're taking some breaks so you're able to go ahead and get your breathing and that back into balance. But that human growth hormone can be synthesized every single night just through your activity. So we have to go ahead and end with that, because I know human growth hormone is one of those hormones that's responsible for so many things, such as improving your muscle mass, really helping you to improve your immunity, helping with keeping your body fat levels down. So, it's a good place to go ahead and end.
And just so that for those of you that have only listened to the audio portion of the Fit to Love podcast show, Movement Mondays is video, and we talk about exercise, and we look at the joints and the impact on the joints and correct form that is most beneficial for getting the most out of your exercise. So make sure to stay tuned and take a look at Movement Mondays. So, Jeanne, if people want to work with you, I know you work with people all over the world. It's not just people that are local. How could they get in touch with you?
Oh, thank you for asking. So, I do Skype sessions just like we're doing right now, but a great way to connect is through the office. It's the Nourishing Wellness Medical Center. We're located in Redondo Beach. The address for our website is www.nourishingwellness.com. And if you go there, you actually can place your information and you can get a healthy hormone kit just by popping in your email information. So I'd love to go ahead and send that off to any of your listeners to help them with how they can improve their overall hormone health.
Jeanne, it's always a pleasure. We could talk for 5 more hours about everything health, wellness related and more. And we will.
Yes.
So we're going to have Jeanne back. So stay tuned for more from Jeanne Peters.
Thanks so much, JJ. Pleasure to be here.
Looking for an engaging and inspiring speaker? Does your group need a good jolt of positive thinking? Look no further than JJ Flizanes. Visit her site to check out her most requested topics and video examples. jjflizanes.com. That's jjflizanes.com.
Break the vicious cycle of emotional eating and take back your power over food with Dr. Lisa Gelper. Visit her site at poweroverfood.com to read her articles, watch her videos, sign up for her monthly email tips, and check out her current classes. The Fit to Love podcast show offers you 6 days a week of helpful content to achieve the happy life you deserve. Movement Mondays and Tasty Tuesdays are weekly videocasts, while Wellness Wednesdays, Thoughtful Thursdays, Freedom Fridays, and Sexy Saturdays are audio-only shows themed every week to address your holistic life and needs. If the show inspired you, we would love for you to share it and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining us today. Head on over to fittolove.tv for recaps of every show, resources, and to join the community. That's FIT2LOVE.tv. Have a fit and fabulous day.